moving to the top of the Eastern Conference, in light of the Giannis injury, and apparently based on the MRI, it's been a soleus injury, which is apparently a muscle in your calf that has nothing to do with the Achilles tendon. But even with the rest that he's taking here at the end of the season, his best case scenario is that he gets another like 8 days off before the series actually starts. And especially when it comes to a calf injury, you don't want to mess with the potential future implications involving the Achilles. So I would imagine they're going to take it somewhat cautiously with Giannis. If they do, because that's the other thing too, is this season's been kind of a lost cause anyway, and you have an opportunity potentially with through the mid-level exception in the trade market next year to try to make some sort of improvement to the roster and rebuild around Dame and Giannis, right? And if Giannis permanently hurts himself, or not permanently, but substantially hurts himself, that could throw a huge wrench into those plans. This is not a 1 year window. There is another year here where they could try to make this work. And so I think there's a chance he misses the first round. If he does, I don't want to write off the Bucks. They're still a talented team with Dame and Brook Lopez anchoring things, and they have that capability, but they're going to run into a good team in the first round. It's going to be someone like Indiana or Miami or Philadelphia or somebody like that. And like all three of those teams, I think without Giannis, I think you have to pick them to beat Milwaukee. So with that being the case, and with the news that Julius Randle is not going to play for the New York Knicks in this playoff run, although the Knicks do look really impressive without Julius Randle still, I'm worried about their firepower up top. So I'm going to pitch this to you first, Logan. Is there any team in the East that is an actual substantial threat to Boston? And if the answer is yes, or I should say, even if it's no, and you had to pick one, who would you pick?
I would put all of my chips in Boston coming out of the East, but I do think there are still two threats. Also, fun fact: I think the soleus is like the most strong muscle in your body, pound
How
for
about
pound,
that?
like in terms of like how small it is in terms of the force you can generate from it. Like I think it's like the like best pound
Some
for pound
soleus
muscle in your
facts
body.
for
Thank
Anyway,
you, Logan.
yeah. um, I hope Giannis is healthy. I do think it is really detrimental to Milwaukee's like championship hopes. Now, we have seen, as you mentioned, Jason, Damian Lillard in games without Giannis, we have seen him, go insane. Just I think he has to go supernova though. You guys can go ahead and call me crazy. You can call me nuts for this one. I still believe in Miami a little bit with their voodoo magic, where I think that again, I think crazy things have to happen. I think a lot of things have to break their right way. There's a little bit of a luck factor. The team that I don't think has to have things break their way as much out east is the Knicks. I have been so absurdly high on the Knicks. And if we had done our contender list like later this week or closer to the playoffs, I think the Knicks might have still cracked my top 10, even without Julius Randle. And it's because of Jalen Brunson. Now, I want to be clear about something. I think the Knicks are better with Julius Randle. They're especially better with good Julius Randle. The size and physicality that you can have with that lineup, with a Hartenstein or a Robinson or Randle, and it's stupid, and then the shooting that you have with these guys, with DiVincenzo shooting the hell out of the pill this year, and what Brunson brings. But it still is the Knicks for me if I really had to get pushed to pick a team. If I want to be clear, if Milwaukee isn't healthy with Giannis, I would take New York. Brunson over this, I think, last 15 game stretch is 35, 3-7 on like 60.5% true shooting. He's leading the league in points per game. And like just those physical advantages. If Jalen Brunson turns into Superman for a playoff run, which I know he is fully and totally capable of, like I fully trust Brunson as my number one in the playoffs. The way he's able to create shots for his teammates, the way this team just plays so cohesively, man. I just love watching the Knicks play. If it's Brunson with a DHO to Anunoby and Anunoby explodes into the paint, if it's Brunson getting into the teeth of the defense, posting up, he gets three defenders looking at him and he dumps off a cut to DiVincenzo. Brunson is an awesome offensive engine. And so that's where my faith with New York starts, but it's everything around them. This team is going to bring the physicality and pain defensively. They are going to play hard all game long. They are going to crash the glass. The Knicks are just going to play really hard on defense, and then Brunson is going to generate great shot quality on offense. So there's a little bit where I like Miami, but if I really had to pick a team and it's not Milwaukee with a healthy Giannis, I still believe in the Knicks a little bit, man. Like, and that's the thing, right? I say the Knicks are better with Julius Randle, but it's almost kind of a benefit a little bit, right, guys? Where it's like, oh, we don't have to worry about Julius Randle like putting up 10 pull-up mid-range jumpers and clanging them all. That it's a double-edged sword where it's like I do think the Knicks are better with great Julius Randle, but they're way worse with really bad Julius Randle. So with the OG Anunoby trade, with them getting Bojan Bogdanovic, where I know he hasn't played great with the Knicks, he's still a great scorer where he could help swing a series with his perimeter shooting. The Knicks are a sneaky, with Brunson playing at this level, I think the Knicks are a sneaky threat out east with a hampered Milwaukee team.
The Knicks would be my second choice to this question. The thing to me, Logan, when you're talking about Randle being a double-edged sword, is not that it's untrue. I'm not a Julius Randle guy. I think there are clear things about his skill set being so reliant on the pull-up shooting where he just has these stretches where he goes ice cold. He's super erratic. Questionable playmaking, just sort of black hole tendencies. Like, I don't like Julius Randle. But when you are talking about beating the Celtics, it is about pushing your ceiling to the absolute peak that it can be. And there's no question to me that if the Knicks want to push their ceiling, they would need Julius Randle just because you have to have a second legit shot creator, mismatch attacker. If his pull-up jumpers are falling, Julius Randle could give you an efficient 27, 10, and 6 in a series. And I just think you need that because I do love how the Knicks match up physically here, even without Randle. Like with Randle, then that would be a problem. But still, they're big in the front court. They just have absolute dogs. With OG on the floor, they have a defensive rating of 100 in the year 2024. It is absurd. And they're 18-3 when he plays. I love the supporting cast. I love the depth. The spot up shooting is so much better than last year. And if Jalen Brunson plays like he has been over these last 15 games, then they probably would be the choice. But I just think that sort of singular load on him against a defense of Boston's caliber isn't sustainable. And that's not a Brunson thing. Like, I love Brunson. I think because of his variety as a shot maker, because of how he dominates the paint in the mid-range, because of his physicality, like, he scales very well. But you're telling me this guy alone has to deal with a full series of Derek White and Drew Holiday and Jaylen Brown and whatever elite, physical, strong perimeter defender they want to throw at him, and he has no other on-ball threats, really? I just think that that's too much. That's too much to put on him. So that's why they are my second choice, because I do still like a lot of the elements of the formula. Philly, to me, is the team, though, that has the ceiling, because I feel like if you are going to beat Boston, a pretty good box to check, maybe the key box, is just having an unstoppable force on the floor. Like having the guy who is just by head and shoulders the best player out there. It's like the rationale for picking Jokic and the Nuggets. Denver's a really, really good basketball team, better than Philly overall, but they also just have like by far the best player on the floor, and that's why I believe in them. If you think about the 22 finals, this is a much better Boston team, but Steph was just this singular force. And of all the people in the East who have that sort of ceiling, if we're taking Giannis out of it, like Embiid is clearly the guy to me. I don't care about his playoff resume. I do care about his playoff resume, but if you're just talking about who has the most ability, who has like the combination of overwhelming physical traits and skilled shot making and can dominate defensively to just completely lap everybody else out there on the floor, Embiid has that ceiling. And then with Melton back, I think they have a pretty nice collection of perimeter defenders. Their spot up shooting is okay. If Maxey explodes, like he has been volatile this year, there's been some up and down stretches, but if he's knocking down his pull-up jumpers consistently, it's a tough matchup having to deal with this collection of Boston perimeter defenders, and especially they're so big and physical. But like if Maxey is just dialed in, there's a ceiling there because of the star power that I don't see anybody else out east reaching. And there's a reason that Philly is 30-8 when Joel Embiid plays, and it's because mostly he's been that overwhelmingly great, and they've put a nice complementary supporting cast. And I know that he's struggled historically against Boston, and Horford has been like the Embiid stopper, but if his jumper's falling, that to me was the biggest issue in last year's playoff series between the two of them. He just couldn't make a jumper. I think if that skilled shot making holds up, then the ceiling is the roof for him. And that just gives Philly more upside than anybody else to me.
So I look at there being three potential threats here. And for the record, per our sponsor, DraftKings, the Celtics are currently minus 170 to win the Eastern Conference. So the DraftKings views Boston basically as unthreatened in the Eastern Conference. I more or less feel the same way. If I had to pick one, though, when I look at those three options, and the three options to me are the Knicks, the Bucks, and the Sixers, all three of them, when they're healthy, I think present a moderate threat to Boston. When I say moderate, meaning like capable of winning, even though you're obviously picking Boston. For Milwaukee, the case is they're literally the best lineup in the league when they're healthy. Minimum 400 minutes. They're outscoring teams by 15 points per 100 possessions, which is literally the best net rating in the league for a lineup that's played that much. For the Knicks, the case is like when Julius Randle's healthy, you have a secondary shot creator. And I love how you have to differentiate between good and bad Julius, because like when Julius has a long runway and is in rhythm, he's actually a pretty solid player, brings some physical stuff to the game. When he's out of rhythm, he's kind of bad. So like that's kind of like more or less the difference between the two. But without the thing with the Knicks is like all year long, they've been one of the most likable and high character teams in the league. They play so hard. They play so physical. They do all of these things well. Jalen Brunson is legitimately a superstar, or a fringe superstar, in my opinion. He's clearly one of the top 15 players in the league, in my opinion, after this season. Has had a much better season than Damian Lillard, for instance. He's kind of like taken that spot away from him in terms of the regular season. But there's a certain talent limitation, and you see that when they play their tougher opponents. They're just 7-17 this year against the teams that are in the top 10 in point differential for cleaning the glass. They are the fourth worst defense in those matchups, giving up 123.4 points per 100 possessions. A lot of small guards on the floor that the really good offenses find a way to attack. So the way that I look at it, like New York to me, is like if they nail their summer, they're going to be a bona fide championship contender next year. I really do feel that way. The thing with Philly, because I agree with you, Carson, like what if Embiid just goes on a wrecking ball run, has always been the case for the upside on when it comes to Philly. However, if I had to pick a season for Embiid to break through in that way, it wouldn't be a situation like this where he's coming back from a meniscus in April to try to get a ramp up and go. Like I just don't think he has the runway to suddenly figure out his playoff issues that he's had in the past. They're undefeated since he returned to the lineup against Oklahoma City Thunder, but outside of the Thunder game, and the Thunder did sit a bunch of guys in that game, they really haven't played anybody. So I mean, Embiid's look fine, but it's hard to really interpret anything from that. So if I had to pick an example of a threat, if I had to, the case would be Milwaukee gets some sort of favorable first round matchup. Like let's say Miami gets through, and Miami obviously is kind of an exposer of fraudulent teams, and I'd probably still pick Miami to win that series. But let's say that you just ride the home crowd, because Milwaukee's been like one of those teams that can be kind of a buzzsaw at home. They go up 2-0, they go down to Miami, they steal one. Dame goes for 45 in game 5, and they win. Okay. At that point, let's say Giannis returns in May, and you more or less have the team that we've seen their top 5 be so dominant. I just think of all of the potential outcomes, that is the most realistic, is that somehow Milwaukee survives the first round, then they get Giannis back. And Giannis is not Embiid. He does not need a runway. That dude walks on the court and is 32 and 15. So like that kind of is more or less how I see the case. For a team, but I don't necessarily see a threat to Boston, a legitimate threat in the Eastern Conference.